So good afternoon, good morning, colleagues, and welcome to our webinar, Data and Tools. For today, we will be looking into how to use data to accelerate action and inform policy with a particular focus on the building sector. My name is Giorgia Rambelli. I'm part of the Covenant of Mayors Office for Europe, and it will be my pleasure to be the moderator of the discussion today. So starting already from the very outset, we expect to have a vivid and lively conversation with all of you, and I would like really to invite you from the very beginning to share your thoughts, your ideas, your question by using the chat function and the Q&A function. There will be plenty of opportunity to interact with our panelists and with our speakers, and we really look forward of exchanging with you. So, as you know, cities and local governments in Europe are really struggling often to access data that they need in order to accelerate local action across multiple sectors. More importantly, Covenant of Mayors signatories in Europe often lack the experience on how to use such data, how to analyze it, and how to apply it for the development of local policy and the implementation, most of all, of their plans. This is, of course, particularly affecting smaller to medium-sized municipalities, and it can severely hinder the action planning and the implementation in sectors such as transport, energy, and building. We have, of course, the great support of a variety of European territorial coordinators and supporters that are playing this important role in helping smaller municipalities in developing their plans and in assessing their baseline. And we are very delighted to have many of these representatives in the call today. Even when data is accessible and available, cities and local governments still are struggling often to manage and process this data required. This is due to limited experiences, but also in gaps around technical capacity, or very often also in gaps around resources available to process this data. So the e-seminar of today, organized in a partnership between the European Covenant of Mayors Office and the Global Covenant of Mayors Secretariat, really aims to discuss this aspect, focusing in the building sector. We know that the building sector is responsible for more than 35% of the overall energy-related CO2 worldwide. As such, of course, improving the building stock should be definitely at the heart of the planning and the implementation of our policy. In particular, right now, when we are talking about racing to climate neutrality by 2050. Innovative measures, for example, around deep renovation, but also on deploying different types of smart technologies, but even in influencing, supporting virtuous changes in occupants' behavior, can also increase efficiency, can also facilitate processes such as the integration of renewable energy sources. This counts both for electricity, but also, for example, for heating and cooling. So the webinar of today is really designed to kickstart a conversation, a practical one, with all of you. And again, I would like to invite you one more time to really interact with us, post your question, your experiences, and also your thoughts around what types of tools and resources can support cities in undergoing this process. So how can we use robust data and valuable tools to race towards climate neutrality altogether, using the most adequate tools and data that is available out there, in particular for the building sector? So in getting us started for this discussion today, we were supposed to welcome our colleague Paolo Bertoldi for the JRC. Unfortunately, he's not able to join us today for his introduction, but no harm done, of course. It's my great pleasure then to give already the floor and to start immediately our conversation by learning a little bit how a variety of cities worldwide have been utilizing and leveraging data and tools and resources available to accelerate climate action. So we will now have the opportunity to hear from a panel of cities that will talk to us about a little bit how they have been using the type of data available to them to implement and accelerate their action, what has been the policy planning and how it has been implemented using these specific tools and these specific data, but also how they have used what was available to them to accelerate action and define local policies. So it is my great pleasure to start our virtual journey across the world. giving the floor to Jason Wood, is the Chief of Sustainability of the City of Cleveland, joining us all the way from Ohio, the US. And he will talk to us a little bit about the experiences, of course, of the City of Cleveland and how it has been using the data of the Google Environmental Insight Explorer. So Jason, the floor is yours.
Georgia. Really excited to be here to talk about a project that we've put together in Cleveland to really help us advance some of our climate goals. In Cleveland, we've been working through our climate action planning process for, there we go, for quite a while now. We put our first climate action plan together in 2013. We did an update. We tend to update on 5-year cycles, did the most recent one in 2018. And emissions reduction is obviously at the heart of that climate action planning process for us. As an older industrial city, we've got some pretty steep goals and some challenges ahead of us. So our main goal through our climate action planning process is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% over a 2010 baseline by 2050. There are other things obviously in there. We want to capture all of the benefits of climate action, but this is really what our plan is driving towards. We've made progress. We've seen some reductions, modest reductions of about 9% since we really started tracking this. But we've seen some significant decoupling, so about a 23% decline in our emissions per GDP. So we're making progress and we're moving along. And I think our involvement in this discussion today is particularly important because as we look at emissions in our Cleveland context and our broader regional context, we have to look at energy use, and in particularly the buildings and industrial sector, just because it makes up such a large share of our overall emissions profile. So I think Georgia mentioned it's about 35% worldwide. We are definitely higher than that in Cleveland, and that's dealing with some of our legacy historical issues. So as we began our climate planning process, we really have 2 sub-goals that relate to energy usage. One is to get to 25% of the electricity supplied into Cleveland from renewable sources by 2030, and then 100% of the electricity demand from clean renewable sources by 2050. And that second one is where we're going to spend a lot of time talking today. We've made progress on the first one. So we have spent up to this point a lot of our time and energy dedicated to looking at the supply side challenge and trying to grow the supply side. If you follow that gray line, which includes both of the utilities who supply electricity into Cleveland and some of the renewable energy credits that we're purchasing through a variety of mechanisms, we're about 13%. So we're about halfway to that goal. And that's really where, up until about the last year or so, most of our focus had been. We've been really focused on trying to drive that supply side generation because that's where data was available. We had not spent as much time on the demand side of the equation. So we wanted to really do that. And I think one of the barriers, and what Matt's going to talk through here in a second, is getting the data access to do that. It's an incredibly data intensive process for us to do this. And we just didn't have the internal capacity to get that data, to do the analysis ourselves. So we wanted to make that intentional effort to focus on that. So we went out, put together a collaborative team of local stakeholders, secured some grant funding to help us do this, and really build an equity-focused, data-driven Cleveland-specific model to do that. That was what we needed to do to really understand what we were gonna have to do over the next 29 years or so to get us where we want to be from a renewable demand standpoint. That was beyond our own internal capacity. So we went out and contracted with Matt and the folks at GreenLink Analytics to help us do that. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Matt to kind of talk through a little bit of what that entailed and kind of the data side of that equation.
Thanks, Jason. So one key thing that we needed to do was figure out exactly how supply and demand were being met and the contours for both of those. So to do that, we brought our Athenia model in, which takes a look at the demand side characterizations, looking at about 90 different prototype buildings that are assigned across the Cleveland footprint to develop an hour-by-hour energy demand from those, and matches those with what's going on in the power supply side of things. And that looks at every electricity generating unit that's providing power to the city. Those two meet, and once we use an artificial intelligence process for this. So we bring those together, we test and train a model. Once it does a pretty good job of understanding the system, we use that to make forecasts. And so you've got a couple pictures here and some descriptions of that, that we were able to achieve a 0.82 R squared in the testing, which gave us confidence that we had a good fit. And you've got a little screen grab down here of the outputs for what about 1 year's worth of data in 2025 looks like in the forecast, looking at the different resources that are being used to meet demand. The next slide will give us a little bit more detail on how we use this information. So we take the outputs of our Athenia work and we put those into our ACES tool, which is really set up for non-experts to be able to use this and explore what the energy futures could be. And so it looks at the potential. What's the cost-effective potential of different resources like energy efficiency, rooftop solar, battery storage, those kinds of things in Cleveland in particular. And we use that to help explore different scenarios. And the Cleveland plan focuses on 3 pathways. So one's just the baseline where there's no policy changes going forward. And then we have the MCE, which is the most cost-effective pathway. And then the max pathway is where we're doing everything up to it that's maximally cost-effective options. And from that, you can see some of the outputs that the net benefits range from $1 billion to $1.5 billion through 2050. We're looking at several thousand jobs added to the city, incomes increasing by 400 million to 1.6 billion, and emission reductions of 17 to 20 million metric tons by going either towards the one that has the highest benefit cost ratio or the one that's going to be the most aggressive path. One of the other things that we identified were a number of barriers to show Cleveland was able to get, roughly 2/3 of the way there with actions that were within their own control. But there's also things that the city will need in terms of supportive state and utility policy if they're going to achieve 100% clean electricity supply, clean and renewable electricity supply for the city without the use of renewable energy credits or the like. The next slide. Yes, thank you. So we used the Google EIE data to help us in that process and getting some characterizations for Cleveland that went into our models. And so we'll show a couple screen grabs of how that was helpful to us on the next slide. So one thing that's within EIE is the ability to take a look at building floor area. And that's really helpful. Like we struggle a lot in the US with unreliable or lacking data that comes from public resources or that even like private companies, collect and sell this. Google has within their Maps platform and within EIE the ability to provide that information and to break that out between sectors. So we could take a look at what the residential and the commercial floor space was within Cleveland using that information and build our models off of that. We could also take a look at the rooftop potential for solar. And so using the Project Sunroof data, which is also integrated into that EIE platform. And so we've got a couple of screen grabs down here at the bottom. The bottom left one is showing that difference between residential and non-residential buildings in Cleveland, just kind of zoomed in close to Lake Erie, the very large lake that Cleveland sits next to. And then the other one is a zoomed in look on the rooftop solar potentials. And you can see, obviously, that's varying. So it's a highly specific building by building assessment. So the Google EIE data is now available for 10,000 cities. You can see that the bulk of those are in North America, but there's also very large coverage in Europe. And I believe the last slide is the next one for us, which is just saying that you can sign up for EIE access. So I think if you look up their website for that, you should be able to register and see if they've got information that's available for you to use.
Sorry, Jason, I'm afraid you're on mute.
Officially the first one to do it today. I guess that's the benefit of going first. So a plan is great, but from our perspective at the city of Cleveland, it's about how do we operationalize that and then take this data model that we've got and translate it into action. So working with Greenlink, we were able to develop about a 70 different policy and program toolkit that we would use to help move us forward. We did some evaluations about what we were already had in place. And the good news is we had made some progress and had put some things in place. And then through the process, ended up making some additional commitments. And then Greenlink recommended, here are some things that you want to do based on what we see in the data sooner rather than later. What I can say this, and I won't read them, these are the various energy efficiency policies that are in place. There it goes. Some of the clean energy and storage related policies that we need to look at moving forward with. Really focus on leveraging the collective purchasing power of the city and our ability to control large facilities and things like that to help advance some things. And then transportation recommendations and commitments that we've made regarding fleet. I won't read through them. They're in a report. We can drop a link in the chat if anybody wants to read the report. I think it's very well done. I might be biased. But what we've been able to do because of this work and having access to this data is advance the conversation much more quickly than we had been able to before. We were looking at things, how do we start to implement some of these things, but being able to come in with a solid data model that says this is what's tangibly possible based on not just our best guess or what we expect to happen, but here is the data that tells us what we can do and the efficiency gains we can gain based on the building profiles and the offsets from transportation shifts and more EVs. I was on a call the other day where, I think it's fair to say, and is we were having discussions about a 10-fold increase in the number of EVs that we're purchasing for our fleet because we were able to show the benefits of it through this data model. And I had lined myself up and I was ready to have a big argument with everybody, and I didn't have to because I said, here's the data, and that makes a lot of sense. So now the conversation moved from should we to how do we, and that's, I think, really helpful for us. So in the interest of time, I think we can probably pause there. And if there are questions, I think we're here and available and more than happy to answer any questions that folks may have about what we did.
Thank you very much to Jason, and I also want to thank very much Matt. I didn't introduce you before, but definitely I think your presentation did the best to present your skills and all the work that you've done. So thank you very much for giving your insights on how Greenlink Analytics has really been supporting the city of Cleveland. I see that some questions are already starting to come in the chat for both of you. But before I read that, since I'm the moderator and I have the power, I just wanted to mention that I think it's very interesting that how you were able also to combine not only this information in terms of also facilitating the process in terms of decision making, but one of the things that we hear all the time is how important it is to connect the different sectors and to bring forward actions and policies that are integrated. And I think this is something that you've shown that you have been doing directly. You were showing how you connected the data around renewable energy potential, buildings, transport measure. So would you have any suggestion to the colleagues on the line that are approaching, maybe a new strategy, maybe a new plan, maybe a new chapter in the policy planning in their own municipality or the municipality they support?
Matt, do you want to take that, or you want me to answer that one?
Can you go first?
Sure.
I felt like I was going in your direction.
Yeah. So, I think one of the things that we did in this plan that was really important for us was taking that kind of cross-sectoral perspective, right? Because we have to think about this holistically. It doesn't come out in the presentation, but I think one of the things that makes us, maybe it doesn't make us unique, but it certainly makes us feel unique in Cleveland, is Matt referenced some of the barriers on energy, and in particular, in our structure in the United States, we have our federal government, we have our state governments, and they really drive what you can do and impact what you can do at a local level. And in Ohio, Cleveland is in Ohio, if you're not familiar with where we are. I think probably the nicest politest way is that our state has not been supportive of renewable and clean energy and energy efficiency programs. If anything, they've been openly anti-clean energy and energy efficiency programs, and there are some issues underlying why that is. So we can't rely on any one thing to get us where we want to be, I think, is the short answer to that question. We have to look at how it all integrates into one comprehensive and complete approach and strategy. And that's why we were really excited about the work that came out of this report and this project, because it really put us in a position to do that in a way that is a little bit more meaningful and a little bit more tangible, because it is so quantitatively driven and quantitatively focused. It's not a discussion of, is this a problem or will this help? It's how much will it help and how do we get there faster? And for us, that's, I think, the real big value in what we've been able to do. Matt, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I just think the data makes it very clear how integrated things actually are. I mean, so actions that, at least when you've got a well-calibrated model, the actions that you're taking in the different sectors are going to see different effects. So like our investments in energy efficiency are going to rebound back into the way that the power sector is going to produce electricity to meet demand, or the stuff in the investments in the transportation side spill over into building energy demand, spill over into the public health arena significantly. And the model was able to help demonstrate where those effects are coming as well, especially with increasing electrification of light duty vehicles coming in a big way for Cleveland. Just seeing how, you know, we're shifting some of these emissions around, but the public health effects of that are substantial, just because we're moving from tailpipe emissions that are right on top of populations out to the power sector for some of that. And then that then goes ahead. We were looking at like a 1 million metric ton transfer between the two sectors. And then that just went back to Jason's point to emphasize that there's going to need to be that leadership at the city level with the utilities and at the state, in order to make sure that we don't go from, you know, 1 million metric tons in the transportation side to 250,000 in the power sector. That's going to need to also, we want that to be clean as well. So, yeah, I think it was really helpful to be able to see and explore that and explain that to everybody through the process.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is very clear. And I also really appreciated the fact that among the indicators that you have listed there, you could see, for example, job creation. And I think also this type of return on investment on the type of planning and policies that we're implementing are crucial. And they should always be, of course, at the forefront of the type of data that we are utilizing. So thank you for the large perspective on this point. And I see there are a few questions coming in. So the first one is coming from Tatiana Gomez, asking about how it is possible to access Google Buildings emission data and if they are available for the Canary Island. And I see Matthew already posted very nicely the direct link to where this information can be found. So thank you very much for that. And Tatiana, please do feel free to reach out to us more if you want more detailed information. We can put you in touch with the colleagues from the IE team as well. There is one more question coming in, actually two, this directly for Matt. The question is coming from Andreas, and he's asking what boundaries underpin the energy future modeling? And did you restrict the exploration to administrative boundaries of the cities or also to the hinterland?
So that's a little bit of a complicated question. When we were figuring out what the energy footprints were for the city, we were calibrating that to the activities that are in the city. So that was looking at the building demands, what were the current residential, commercial, industrial demands, and like I mentioned, we tried to disaggregate that to a pretty high level of detail, so that we could say, if we made certain investments in homes that were constructed in the 1950s, we would see this kind of effect versus homes built in the 2000s, right? Like we could take a look essentially decadally across our sectors and see what the impacts would be. And that helped identify like which energy efficiency or which solar investments were going to be the ones that would really bear fruit. When we take a look at the the power sector, there's very little power generation that happens within the city. So obviously that's got to go bigger. We used Athenia in that case to help identify which of the electricity generating units that are in the marketplace that serves Cleveland were actually responsive to Cleveland's demand, and help to draw a boundary line around that. And then we accounted for power purchases and transfers into that kind of boundary bubble that was established. But that gave us, again, that same kind of hour by hour system perspective that we could then also take a look at what were the emissions from each of those electricity generating units, what was the water consumption if those were thermoelectric, how are these things operating, and then again, how does it all come together? So how are these going to change as usage patterns change? So it's a little bit of a yes to both kind of answer to there.
There is a second question from Andreas, so I think building upon this one actually, is asking specifically about industrial emissions. So Andreas is saying Cleveland has a strong industrial legacy, but the IE does not identify industrial uses. How did you go about reflecting these industrial emissions, energy use, and energy generation potential in your model?
Yeah, that's a great question. Cleveland actually has the largest industrial base of any city that we've worked with in the US, and we've worked with over 80 on these kinds of questions. So it was definitely something that had to be considered if we wanted to have an accurate look at Cleveland. To do that, this was actually kind of where I cut my teeth as a researcher, was in the industrial sector. And so we brought a lot of our own models that we could take a look at what kind of industrial activities were present in Cleveland and could map that to, again, hour by hour demand for natural gas and for power, which are the predominant fuels used in industry in Cleveland, and could start to build that out. We had some demand data also that the city had from doing all the work that they've been doing on greenhouse gas inventories for years. So we could at least line that up with the power sector consumption information that their utilities had been tracking and see that we got a pretty nice fit from that. But yeah, it was the breakout that's in EIE is really helpful in giving us the perspective on everything that's non-residential. But we had to take a further split to segment that between the commercial and the industrial side.
Thank you very much for responding to these questions and also for giving us a flavor of the great work done in Cleveland. So I know you're going to be staying with us for the rest of our call. So colleagues, please feel free to keep on sending your questions our way. We will have more opportunity to discuss both with Jason and with Matt in the next hour. But now I would like to move a little bit closer to home and then return to Europe. And it's my great pleasure to give the floor to Sylvie Mingant. He's the head of urban ecology and the energy division of the city of Brest in France, who will be talking to us a little bit about the experiences of Brest and in particular how it has been using the European Energy Award. So Sylvie, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello. So I'm Sylvie. I'm head of the energy department of Brest, and I'm there with Michael Thomas, with our advisor, and so he will share the presentation and begin, and I will continue.
Thank you very much. Speaking of tools and data, we will start by a short introduction to the European Energy Award, which is probably the second largest.
I'm so sorry, Michael, to interrupt you, but we can see a gray screen right now. We don't see your presentation.
Yeah.
Just before you start, I wanted to make sure that we are seeing what we are supposed to.
Well, actually, you don't. I'll try to share again. Is that somewhat
and now
better?
we can. Yes, perfect.
Okay, so this is a nice image of Brest. Sylvie will speak more about it. And I'll start with the European Energy Award, which is probably the second largest initiative for energy and climate after the Covenant of Mayors. It is something that has been living for 25 years. It was originated in Switzerland, Germany, and in Austria. And you may find this initiative under various names, for instance, E5 Austria, TINERGIE in France, EA in Germany, Comune Clima in Italy, etc., etc. And there are some pilot countries trying to expand on this. And what is this thing? Actually, it is a holistic 360 degrees evaluation process of all climate, air, and energy policies, and it's very much built upon a deeming wheel, such as in energy, in quality assurance, for instance, because you start with a commitment, and then you have an advisor that comes in that's contracted with by the city, and then there is lots of support like catalogs, tools, KPIs, data collection sets, assessment guides, etc. And this all leads to building up a strategy and an action plan based on ideas, best practices, and benchmarking, and implementing those over 4 years. There is a regular monitoring every year, and then there is every year an external audit that gives an award, which is either a European Energy Award or Gold. This is when you exceed 75% of your total capacity of action. Now, there are some projects supported by Europe, Horizon 2020, that are, for instance, COMEASY, that is meant to synchronize the European Energy Award to the Covenant of Mayors and help to easily develop SACAPs. And actually, there is also a possibility for the Covenant of Mayors local authorities to build up their SACAPs and also get them monitored via the European Energy Award. And the second project we're mentioning is Compete for SACAP, which is more same thing, but based more on ISO 50001 certification for local authorities, data-based, of course, SACAP development and energy competition, just to sensitize the users. So once we've said that, is just to introduce the fact that Brest Métropole has been a very active and proactive project partner in those projects, which were very, very interesting to them. And I give the floor over to Sylvie.
Okay, so just to situate, Brest Métropole is located at the western tip of France in Brittany, and it does include 8 cities, represented 210,000 inhabitants. So Brest was totally destroyed in the World War, so most of the buildings were built in the 50s. There is 115,000 dwellings. So the building sector is the main greenhouse emission gas, and it represented 56% of the energy consumption. So today, Brest Métropole is in a climate active territory, and we are already implementing several structuring action as the extension of the waste and wood heating networks, promoting the collective transport, for example, bus and tramway. The building refurbishment platform has been created on 2012 to assist private individuals, including those who are in fuel poverty situation in the refurbishment of their dwellings. So Brest Métropole is also a territory which accommodates land and marine renewable energy. So in the European Energy Award process, so it's a very strong manage of our energy climate policies. The methodology is a bit academic, but it also allows to check everything with the transition energy regards. So you can see there our progression on per sector. So we can just show that the cooperation is the main sector. We have made a lot of action and for sensibilization and with citizen participation, and it's very important for us because the world change and citizen and other stakeholders used to must do their own action to achieve our goals, because there is very ambition for us with the CCAP. So we try to do it with all of our member citizens and stakeholders. So we can zoom on the building refurbishment. So it's concerned the residential park exclusively. During the last 6 years, so you can see that we have 26,000 advice, 2,600 refurbishment financed with some subsidies of the metropole, about 30 million euro of subsidies. And we need to accelerate to reach our 2050 goals, because all buildings have to become low energy consumer. And there is a great challenge for us. So TINERGIE, it's the call of the name of our platform. So TINERGIE is the public one-stop shop energy concerning platform created to assist private individuals in the refurbishment. And we have different topics on this platform. So the first level is about information and advice about energy saving question, operated by the local energy agency we call Emergence. We have also legal advice because it's very complex to work on the topics. So the second level is to help the owner with works and comfort. So we have different topics on poor household and in houses, and middle class in house. And for owners houses, the direct grant by Brest Metropole is based on fixed performance bonus, depend of the energy save percentage, about 40% minimum. And a variable bonus depend of the nature of retrofitting, like insulation, windows or ventilation. For vulnerable household, so energy poverty tenants, we have a specific program, and for the end, we can also try to develop energy renewable in refurbishment buildings. So we work on the solar energy too. So the ambition today is to work on the co-ownership on condominiums, because it's very important. Brest Metropole want to create public and private housing partners on retrofitting strategy with a broad long-term perspective, and it will go beyond the field of housing, and will aim to ensure integration and cooperation between housing, urbanism, and urban refurbishment. We can continue. Okay. Okay, so on data, today we work about energy and greenhouses gas monitoring for the building sector, but it's not the real data, and often it's about modelization. The energy climate atlas we can identify ice consumption, district with fuel consumption. We have also a map with the solar potential. So in a web tools, so everyone can show its potential of the roof. The energy poverty is detected by the social services. A link to TINERGIE too. And data for refurbishment is from voluntary context. And tomorrow we'll talk about early energy and gas emission monitoring for the building sector. We work with the grid operator to do that. Data from the smart buildings and electric and gas network. So after work of TINERGIE, there is a post refurb monitoring. And so we work with enterprise like SME in database to link to the tenants who want to refurbish our dwellings. So we try to work on a feasibility of third-party financing, but it's not so easy. So there is we have all of things to do to achieve our goals. Then a few examples of atlas on the other slide. So here you can see the atlas. So at the top, you can see that we can identify the most energy-intensive buildings on the territory, and then we have also something for the dealings we are warm with fuel. And at down, you can see the solar atlas, and we have connected simulation tool for the grid connection. So it's okay for me, Miguel. So as conclusion, the Energy European Awards TINERGIE is a crucial evaluation tool for us for progressing, and its collaborative engagement and objective monitoring method, and the presence of Michael, also the accredited advisor, is a real advantage, because year after year we can see our evolution, and we can try to do it better. Benchmark, it's possible also with the other community who are involved in Europe, and so it's a very good help to our CCAP and other urban policy too.
Just coming back for that, this is the top over 60 gold European Energy Award communities, and we see that many of them are very, very active, such as Brest Métropole, with nearly 80% of their potential, which is tremendously high. And that shows that gives us the final image with the mirror of energies on the left, which is a district heating hot water tank for peak shaving and optimization. the cable car, urban cable car, and a beautiful image of a Brest Métropole. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both Sylvie and Michael for the presentation. I think, again, we saw not only how you can bring together different sectors, we're looking into the rest potential, into the potential for the renovation, but also connecting it to social measures, like you were mentioning, reducing energy poverty. I think this type of holistic approach is definitely something that we wish our tools and our data can help us drive forward. So that was very enlightening. I personally really enjoyed your one-stop shop solution as well. I think right now, across Europe in general, with this renovation wave that we are trying to kickstart across the continent, this type of solutions where you can find different support and access to information are extremely important. So I think that that's a wonderful support tool, especially to navigate red tape and legal barriers as well. So definitely very inspiring. Thank you so much. I have a question about this one-stop shop, of course, but I see that there are already quite a few questions rolling into the chat. So Sylvie, starting with a question from Andreas. Andreas is asking, as many buildings in Brest were reconstructed or constructed in the 50s, you are likely to encounter similar building forms. Are you exploring also prefabricated and modular approaches?
Not yet, because I understand the idea, but for condominium, for example, it's the decision to make work, which is very difficult to have. So it's more this sociological difficulties. We want to work harder on this, and for housing, it's a bit difficult too, I think so. So it's not the use for the moment, but in France and I think it's an North experience. There is a strong project. Michael, you know it? I think so.
TINERGIE. It's a Dutch initiative. There's also standardization initiatives and grouped refurbishment initiatives by contractors. That answers the second part of Andres' question. There is, of course, involvement in training them, and the idea is to upgrade the number and the skills of the profession. And back to Sylvie to complete.
No, it's okay.
There is also a follow-up question, also triggered by this interest in this one-stop shop that they have shown us. So on the Renovation Advice Center, in addition to providing advice and support to homeowners, are you also engaging in training scheme to improve skills of contractors? And are you facing difficulties in establishing a database of local contractors that owners can actually get in touch with?
You see, I don't speak English very well, so I have to understand very well your question. Michael, can you help me?
S'il est difficile d'avoir des contacts avec des entreprises pour les former, et s'il est possible ou compliqué d'avoir des contacts entre les entreprises et le public.
It's difficult to work with the SME, the enterprise. So the craftsmen only work on their own topics, and then it's difficult to match everything to do a good and performance refurbishment, and that's why we work about this. But it need I think we spent a lot of time on that, and it's a bit difficult, yes.
Thank you very much, Sylvie. And I think it's quite inspiring, all the work that you are doing. And we were delighted to hear from the experiences of Brest. I know you are also staying until the end of our call. So I see a question there that is already addressed to all panelists, and I would like to park it for our wrap-up session of Q&A. So be ready. Something is coming your way very soon. But I would like to now give the floor to our final speaker of the day. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Martin Hawley. He's a technical project manager at the Center for Sustainable Energy. Martin will be talking to us about a tool which has been developed within a EU-funded project, and in particular, a variety of different experiences coming from cities in Europe, Bristol, I understand, from the UK, Granollers from Spain, and Salaspils from Latvia. So we have also a good geographical representation across Europe. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Georgia. So hopefully you can see my screen now, which is the opening slide with Thermos on it. Is that correct?
Perfect. Yeah.
And you can all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So this is just a short presentation, really, talking about this tool called Thermos, and it's a tool that's been in development since probably late 2016, and it's about the planning of heat networks. And it was part of a Horizon 2020 project, which CSE coordinated, and we worked with 14 partners in this project. So yeah, it's been a long time coming, but it completed in March this year. So it's a really good time to demonstrate it now and look at how people have been using it. But I thought it would be good to make a start with looking at why we thought the tool was needed in the first place. So I'll cast my mind back to when we wrote the proposal, which was actually late 2015, I think. We noticed that I mean, there was this plan for decarbonisation of heat, yeah, and it's been a kind of growing priority that heat networks are an important part of the trajectory towards net zero in cities especially. And we noticed that there was a bit of a lack in terms of you know, effective tools that could be used to do this and accelerate the development of heating networks. And I won't talk about all the benefits of heat networks. I'm sure you're familiar with those, but it relates to being able to deliver energy much more efficiently and lower emissions and associated benefits like that. But the sort of existing ways of doing thermal energy system planning and looking at district heating networks, we found by talking certainly to lots of local authorities and to consultants that it's very time consuming and expensive to do. And of course, local authorities have quite limited resources, and that varies right the way through different local authorities from different countries. And there's also a lack of consistency among the techniques used by the consultants. They tended to use different, and still do in some respects, different methodologies. Not all of them are that transparent either. And yeah, there's lack of capacity building generally within local authorities. So this relates to that previous point about you know, being able to have enough resource and time and expertise to plan and facilitate district heating projects within a certain area. So you know, we thought there was a gap there, and we could develop a tool that could help to address all these points. And so what we've come up with is Thermos tool, and that stands for Thermal Energy Resource Modeling and Optimization System. I guess the main things to say about it up front are that it's an open source tool. It's a web-based tool. So it's available online. Anyone can use it. It's generally used for pre-feasibility planning of heat networks, sort of that high level initial part, but it also kind of overlaps, we found, into the more technical detailed feasibility studies as well. So it's kind of useful in that respect. And you can see there's two middle boxes, just that there's two main parts to it, and that's about energy demand estimation and mapping. And then there's the other bit, which is about looking at the network and optimizing that network and the supply as well to see what kind of networks are possible. So what I'll do now is just before I just talk a little bit about how the tool works, I wanted to just present very briefly, just show you three examples of how it's been used, and we worked with a number of local authorities and cities in the project as in a kind of agile way in developing the tool. So they came on the journey with us, and they were constantly feeding back and testing and everything. So, you know, we hope that it's fit for purpose in that sense. So this first one is based in Bristol in the UK, which is where I am now. That's where CSE is based. And this one actually, so it was using Thermos as a way to see if it was suitable to do quick assessments of new connections to an existing network. So Bristol has got a small network, and it's got plans to expand that. And what they wanted to do, because they were constantly getting requests from individual organizations who are close to the network, you know, could they be on the network? Could they join? And the previous way of doing this, that the council had to employ someone to do some sort of detailed technical work involving hydraulic modeling to work out whether the pipes can accommodate, you know, extensions to a certain building. And what they wanted to test was whether Thermos could be used as a kind of what we call a proxy to do that. So whether it could do a kind of rough and ready approximation of that, so that they would avoid initially having to do the expensive, technical, time-consuming study. And in order to give them sort of confidence that Thermos could do that, they did test. They compared Thermos with a previous study where detailed technical assessment had been done, and compared the outputs, and it was quite a reasonable match. So the outcome was that they did find that Thermos could help them with this. So their intention is to go ahead and use it, and you know, it really enables them to do this kind of work a lot quicker, and in order to get sort of cost-effective assessments of network connection requests initially. And then the lessons learned there were mainly about the data, the source data, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute in terms of what Thermos needs. But there's, in order to improve the data input, that they found it would have been helpful for someone to have GIS expertise in order to get that data into Thermos. But there's also a facility where you can input and output spreadsheets and adjust things in that way if you don't have that GIS expertise. So that was one use of Thermos, and it was an interesting one because we weren't really expecting somebody to do that kind of comparison. So it was good to help them, support them in that, and look at the results. The next one, we're going over to Spain here. So this is Granollers near Barcelona, and they were looking to model a new heat network in an area of the city called the Ecocongost industrial complex. And they wanted to incorporate renewable energy sources, so feeding into this network. So we're talking biogas, biomass, various forms, and also waste heat. And they wanted to, it wasn't just about economics, it was also about emissions reduction, obviously, and considering energy efficiency as well within the buildings. And the interesting thing about this one is that they wanted, because it's an industrial complex, they wanted to look at the possibility of using high temperature steam, so steam as a heat medium in the network. So that was something that we introduced in Thermos as a result of this study, that capability to model not just hot water but steam. So they spent quite a lot of time and put a lot of resource into doing this case study, and it was mainly about getting all that data. And what they found in the lessons learned here was that real demand data is important for if you're looking at industrial sites. And just very briefly, I mean, Thermos, it will estimate energy demands, and again I'll talk about that in a minute, but it's less good for estimating the demands of non-domestic kind of, industrial type buildings, because you just don't know what processes are going on inside that building. Thermos tends to look at the space and water heating requirement, not the process heating. So if you have that local data, it's important to get that. And I know that Grenollier's had issues with data privacy in getting hold of that data. So that was quite challenging, because it was the private sector mainly that they were dealing with. But the end result of this study was that they found, Thermos again provided a very quick, low-cost way to produce some initial results, which they considered valid, and it was similar to a similar study that they had done previously by a group of internal experts on the same thing. So again, they were comparing, to see what Thermos, how it performed. And the final one, I was just covering 3 here, just to show you the range of applications. Really, there are others, obviously. We'll go into Latvia to Salaspils. And this is where they were looking at the use of Thermos to evaluate priority zones for connection to an existing district heating network. So they've got a network there which provides a big proportion of the energy demands of the city. They've also got a big solar collector plant, as you can see in the top right picture there. But what they wanted to do was that there was a requirement for these zones in and around the existing network, that if there was going to be new development or refurbishment going on in those zones, then they needed to use zero emission heating or connect directly to a network. And Thermos was used then to look at that and compare against existing processes for network planning. And lessons learned there was that Thermos again proved to be a simple to use by non-specialists, and was very quick. But the lesson learned there as well was that they needed to sort of build trust in the validity of the outputs of Thermos. But that very much depends on the inputs. So if you've got rubbish in, you often get rubbish out, as the saying goes. Right, I don't want to go on for too much longer, because I know we're running short of time, but just to very briefly look at these 2 slides. One is about demand estimation of Thermos. This is, so the thing with Thermos is that it can be used almost anywhere there's OpenStreetMap data, because that's how it makes its estimates of the heat demand. You can supplement that with local data, GIS data, but basically, if you've got OpenStreetMap data and you've got information about the height of the buildings, which you can get through something called LiDAR coverage, which is a data set that measures the sort of the height above ground of objects, then Thermos uses that to estimate the energy demands, the space heating demands, and makes assumptions about the water heating demand as well. So that's what Thermos does with regards to energy demand. It's very easy just to create a map and it processes that, and you've got a kind of heat map, and you can do that within literally a few minutes with Thermos. The network optimization is the other part. This is a bit more complicated, but just very briefly, this is where you can start looking at your map and selecting certain buildings, applying a supply and specifying what that supply is, filling out a few other defaults. It's the thing here, you don't need to be a specialist to do this. There's two functions to choose from on which it will optimize. One around sort of network net present value, the best value of that, or a whole system one where it will look at a network, and if it thinks buildings aren't worth connecting to the network, it will give them, you can specify that they'll have insulation and maybe an air source heat pump as an alternative. So it considers that. That's what we mean by whole system. And that just considers the overall lowest cost solution. And finally, if I just press the right button, sorry, button. Just to wrap up, yeah, Thermos, as I said at the start, finished in March. So yeah, it's not long completed, but we know that it's being used around the world actually by a whole range of groups and people, consultants, local authorities, etc. I think we've got something like 1,500, 1,600 registered users at the moment. In terms of applications, it's good for heat mapping and the pre-feasibility modeling of new networks, and you can also look at the expansion of existing networks. And I think the key advantages, just really briefly, are that you can do very quick, rapid assessments. You don't have to be a specialist to do them. The data requirements are not prohibitive. You can use OpenStreetMap data to get a very basic start with Thermos. Local data obviously improves accuracy and improves input. And it's web-based and there's a free access public version. So sorry, that was a little bit rushed, a bit quick, but that's me wrapped up with the presentation. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Martin, for the comprehensive presentation. I see one question immediately coming in for you. The question is, an increasing number of innovative new building projects in Europe are now capable of producing more electrical and thermal energy than they consume. The colleague is asking, considering this trend, is Thermos able to take into account significant surpluses being fed into low temperature district heating networks during the peaks?
That's quite a specific question. It has a supply model, so it can optimize both the network itself and the supply, and it can optimize in terms of if you've got more than one supply. So it will do what you've just said in a kind of basic way. In terms of the technologies, the generation technologies, it will, you just specify that basically in terms of the capacity, the energy delivered, and the cost of the heat that comes out into the network. So it's flexible in that respect, and yeah, it will. I think it will do what you're saying, but at a fairly high level.
Thank you very much. I will invite again the colleagues to post their questions. And in the meantime, I will ask, please, all the panelists and the speakers to turn on back their camera. We still have a question that was parked there from earlier that I wanted to say from when we were all reconvening. Daniela is asking to all the speakers and to all the panelists, how do you share the information generated with the citizens? How can they access the information that you are using for this policy planning? So I don't know who wants to start on giving us a little bit of a feeling for how all of this information then also feeds back to our citizens in our communities. Okay, then I will start with Matt and Jason, since I have the power.
I had a sense we were going that way. I think from our perspective, one of the things we've really prided ourselves on in Cleveland with our sustainability related efforts is our community engagement and getting residents involved, right? I think we've always approached this from a mindset that we're not going to be able to do this if we can't bring our residents with us. And due to some of the unique, well, again, I use that word, some of the challenges we face in Cleveland around equity in particular, this is critically important that as we engage this, we get this information out to residents in a way that they can digest it. So what we've had to do is think about how to approach it at two levels, because obviously the modeling that goes on behind the work that we've done and Matt and his team put together is very complex and it's very overwhelming to an average resident. And we don't want that critically important message about the things that they can do and how to participate get lost. We've really had to create two tracks of the ways we communicate this. So our residents can get access to the full report. It's online. We've distilled it down to, I think, a fairly manageable thing. In the month or 6 weeks since we kind of have put it out into the world, I can't even remember how many times I've had gone to virtual community meetings, but community meetings nonetheless, to talk about the things that we're doing and how the public can interact with it. As we look to say, okay, who are the folks that need access to that data? One of the recommendations that came out of our process was to look at this clean energy task force that will bring kind of some of the more technical, some of the facility managers, some of the building level folks to the table, some of the larger system users that we see in Cleveland to the table. That's going to be a different level of engagement for us. And we're going to have to figure out how to get some of that modeling information specific to them as well. One of the things we've done now is start to work with some of our other cities in Ohio too, Cincinnati and Columbus and Toledo and a few others, if you're familiar with Ohio geography, on getting access to parcel and building specific usage data that we can now use to target and structure solutions to. So it's kind of having to operate on multiple levels. But that first pass to the general public, to residents and citizens, is making it as easily digestible as possible so that they can get that key message, and then finding other innovative strategies to get the more technical data-driven modeling information into the hands of the folks who need it to make those decisions.
Thank you. That makes.
If I can,
please go ahead.
Piggyback on that super quickly. Yeah, one of the other things that we've been really impressed with Cleveland was the engagement with community throughout the entire process. And so there's been a stakeholder group who was active throughout just the development of the plan. And actually one of our other team members who worked on the Cleveland plan is running a meeting now with 40 different community members from Cleveland, going through the equity data, the racial justice data, and how that ties in with the energy consumption and energy burdens, to help them understand what that context is and what actions they can take to address it, which builds, and we've developed some tools that try to help with that conversation around, like, there's a process guide that we've developed that's deployed to help facilitate those conversations, but it's really led by the city and led by those community groups, and trying to make sure that there's a participatory process all around.
So Matt said something nice about us, so I guess I'm obligated to say something nice about Matt and his team too. Also, so Matt, as he went through his discussion, he spent a lot of time on Athenia and that, and kind of said, we've got this ACES tool as well. As a city, we have that ACES tool that we can continue to go back to and run different scenarios to map different expected outcomes and benefits. And that gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility from a community engagement standpoint to say, here are all the different, look, all right, you think that's too much here? Let's dial it down and see what happens. And so having that tool to kind of replicate these analyses kind of in a more real-time setting is critically important to us.
Thank you.
Could I just make one quick comment, Georgia?
Of course, please go ahead.
So obviously in terms of heat networks and the Thermos tool, it's quite technical, and it's although you can share the maps with people and people can collaborate on the analysis that you're doing, in terms of citizens, it's not really that accessible because it's quite technical. But you know, if we're looking at heat networks and the plans for rollout, I think it's certainly in the UK. I find it remarkable that so many people don't really understand what they are And one thing that we're involved with at the moment is we're working with BEIS in the UK. That's government department, the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And we've actually used Thermos techniques, the model in Thermos, to look at a way of zoning cities. So you produce zones which have the most potential, shall we say, for district heating. Yeah, and we're doing a bit of work at the moment on social research on that. So we're just doing quite a few workshops with a range of the community. So this is it could be businesses, it could be social housing providers, local authority people, community groups, and just talking about this and talking about district heating networks. And the idea is to get all that information back so that the government can run a consultation on it, because there could be requirements in the future to connect to a network if you are in a zone, certainly for new build. This is sort of a potential policy in the future. And it's a similar thing to that other case study in Latvia that I presented earlier on. So yeah, I just thought I'd raise that. It's quite an interesting point.
No, it makes a lot of sense. It's inform and engage. I think both of them are crucial and important to improve also the ways that we implement on the ground our actions. And before I give the floor to Sylvie to also share, because you mentioned very clearly how much you are also trying to engage, especially when it comes to renovation, your citizens and inhabitants of condominium and residents and so on. So I'm sure that you have a lot to share. I want to alert already Paolo, who in the meantime managed to join us. Hi, Paolo, I hope you can hear us. Paolo from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. Paolo, you will have the very tough job to get us to a closing. So I just want to alert you and to make you aware that we expect your comments and your closing words at the end of this interesting discussion. I'm not jealous of your task. Sylvie, would you like to share your experience in the meantime?
Yes, just it depends on the tools because some of them are very strong and very complicated and not for the citizen. It's for our colleague on urban, on transport district. And but for the solar atlas, for example, it's on the web application. So citizen and other stakeholders like business or they can use this tool and show their potential. And it's very used by the energy community, the citizen energy community in Brest. We want to develop some project on the building.
Thank you very much. I don't know if what Michael also wants to add from his perspective in terms of an auditor. Is this something that remains crucial for all the cities to also have this step? Is that one of the things that you audit also, how they engage citizens into these processes?
Oh yeah, and engagement in France is very top down basically, because all the conurbations, about 20,000 inhabitants, have to carry out the climate, energy, and air action plans. Not only have they the obligation to carry them out, but they also have the obligation to publish everything on their websites. So everything is really public, including the citizen involvement, the good advice, the the opinion of the environmental administration that may tell them at sometimes, well, you don't fulfill your own tasks, you have to publish that too, even if you don't like it. So if you want to brush up your French and you're very interested, I'll try to put a link in the chat, which is the access to Brest Metropole's climate action plan, which is one of the best.
So we are going to all of us brush up our French and read what Brest is planning to do, but also we have an offer from Cleveland to share all of these documents. So I think we have a lot of readings, and I just take this opportunity to say we will of course share the recording of this meeting, and as well as the presentation that were provided with everyone. And if the speakers have any other document or any other information that you would like to share with the rest of our audience, please do feel free to send it to us, and we will be able to disseminate it. So Paolo, can you hear us now? I think it's time for your wrap up. And we'll unmute you.
Oh,
Yes, we can hear you, Paolo. Hi, welcome.
okay. There's some trouble connecting today at the beginning, so I joined late, and I'm pleased that you had a very interesting presentation and session with a lot of questions and doubts. This brings to an end a series of three very interesting workshops on the issue of tools to help city to collect the data and then implement the action, and then, of course, monitor the results. The three topics are very much connected. So we are not organizing the Covenant of Mayors or other city initiative to collect data. These activities are programs or alliance are there to help city to reach climate targets, challenging climate targets for mitigation and adaptation. And the action is the priority, getting the city to implement different type of action in mobility, in buildings, and renewable energies to reduce the emissions and to become more resilient. Of course, if a city with ambitions, and as we know, most of them limited resources, have to carefully plan where they want to take action to get the most benefit and result from the limited resources, financial resources, human resources, and also possibility to work with local stakeholders. So this work brings in the data. Data are tools to achieve the result, to understand where the city starts from, where the action can result in higher emission reduction per euro spent, and how to monitor if this action has been effective as delivered plan design. And this data, I say, is fundamental, but it's very hard and very expensive to collect. So tools help cities to collect this data. Sometimes data are available from tools that allow cities to get this data somehow without doing a full monitoring of their local conditions as a helpful guide, which can sometimes be complemented with local data or data downscale from national data or regional data. Then this tool may also implement, help in the implementation phase. They may guide in the design of the action. We see, for example, tools on how to assess the potential for renewables, how to assess the efficiency of the buildings and which are the priority buildings, and see then after the measure what is the new consumption in buildings, of course without every business, but having more a holistic look at the building stock in cities. And the same for transportation, most probably the most elusive and more difficult sector. So I hope that all these tools can be on cities, they can stand from them, and are part of GCoM toolbox. So say where the city can go and find a tool. But we know, of course, also that there are many other tools developed at the local level by cities, by region, by project, Horizon 2020 project, or elsewhere in the globe. So I believe that one of the important tasks of the GCoM is really to collect this tool test them for cities, and then propose them to cities, have a continuous training on these tools, and recommend them, of course, according to the needs of the cities. I think I appreciate very much this series of workshops, and I hope that in future they may continue as tools evolve, new tools will come. So from my side, that's all. I thank you very much, GCoM and the European Covenant of Mayors for organizing together this series of workshops, and Georgia for moderating them, and Nicola for taking care of the practical details. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paolo. I want to echo all of your messages, and also thank, of course, not only Nicola for the support in organizing these events, but the colleagues at the Global Covenant of Mayors Secretariat as well as all the speakers, especially the ones, of course, that are on the line today, for taking the time to share their knowledge, their insights, and their experiences. I just would like to conclude by saying it's true, there are still a lot of challenges out there on how to collect data. You were saying that it might be difficult, it might be expensive, it might be a bit overwhelming even to collect all of this information. But luckily, we have not only tools that are out there to support us in the process to collect, analyze, and also inform our policy with this type of data available, but also a lot of great experiences from cities like the one that we heard today, from Cleveland, from Brest, and from all the cities that joined us in this journey of 3 webinars around data and tools. So I want to thank very much the speakers once again for bringing to the table their experience and their knowledge, and also for sharing a little bit of the insights of what kind of challenges they have faced. Hopefully this will be just a chapter in a larger collections of webinars and on tools and data, as you're saying. I think we already have pinpointed some interesting future opportunities, for example, around visualization of data and communicating data to our citizens. So I think this is something else that we might want to look forward to in the future to continue discussing. But for now, I really want to thank you all for your time and for your contribution. Everything will be made available. We will circulate all of this different information, and we look forward to new opportunities to learn more by the cities that have from the cities that have been participating, but also by other sources and from other cities around the world that might join this series, and to continue exchanging on their own expertise and experiences. So thank you for your time.